Welcome everyone for joining us today, whether it's your evening, afternoon, or morning. We are happy to have you with us. So I am Melissa Deschamps. I am the Regional Educational Advising Coordinator with Education USA, primarily working with centers in the Middle East and North Africa. And we are happy today to have with us John Nesbitt from Duolingo, who will be leading the discussion and the session, giving you more details and information about the test. What is it? How do you take it? Where is it accepted? So please be ready to have any questions you might have. And I will turn it over to you, John. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. And thank you to all the advisors around the region for joining us this afternoon or this evening. And it is morning for me in Nashville time. I'll briefly introduce myself. I am based here in Nashville, Tennessee, as prior to joining Duolingo. I spent 12 years at Vanderbilt University, which is my alma mater, so I really enjoyed my time there. I might have met a few of you, and if not, I might have been to your region's advising center. More than likely just having met or been in your center, as I got the lucky opportunity to kind of cut my teeth and have my first international admissions experience in the Middle East on a very interactive and very thorough CIS tour that we went through about 10 or 11 countries. So I'm delighted to spend some time with you and tell you a little bit more about the Duolingo English Test, but also, as I mentioned, with my experience at Vanderbilt and co-chairing the international admissions and enrollment management team there for a number of years, can maybe speak to that experience and from the admissions voice as well if you have questions about that. As Melissa mentioned, the chat is going. Melissa is monitoring it. So yes, let's make this as interactive as possible. I want to make sure you all leave fully understanding it. I've blocked off a little bit of additional time on the back end if you all have further questions, so please do let me know. Hopefully everyone walks away understanding a whole lot more about the test and why this test is just so exciting. So let's start kind of at the beginning. I'll just kind of a quick agenda. We're going to talk a little about the proficiency and the admissions process, of course, and introducing the test, as well as how the subscores work. How students should be preparing for the test. This is something that, again, is pretty radical, just like many things in our test, and really something that's so new and transformative and using technology and the whole mission behind everything we do, whether it's Duolingo or the Duolingo English Test, is all about access and expanding access. And so how we see test readiness is also in this similar, unique, access-forward vein, and that is that we provide it all for free. There's an incredible test readiness guide and almost an 80-page PDF that advisors or students can download, as well as free practice tests. So we'll talk all about that in the session as well. So let's start with Duolingo, the language app. You all probably know this. Some of you maybe have it downloaded on your phones or at some point have used it or know friends and family who have used it. The largest education app in the world. We teach over 30 languages. And the mission behind our organization, as I was mentioning just a moment ago, is to develop the best education in the world and make it universally available. It's all about access. And that is partially due to our founder. Our founder is from Guatemala. And he knew firsthand in a developing nation that if you can learn English as a secondary language, you can increase your earning power exponentially, upwards of the 200% in some countries around the world. And so it was crucial for people around the world to be able to add English specifically. Other languages came along, but early on it was, how can we teach English for free? But how can we make it as good as the most expensive software out there? And the problem with people around the world needing to learn English to try to find some upward mobility is that it was at the time around $1,000 for something like Rosetta Stone. So no one could really afford it who needed it. And that's why we needed to come around. So we built this beautiful app that's really changing the name of education and access around the world. And he also has a little bit of a connection to taking an English proficiency test, because as you see, he's from Guatemala and he did attend school in the universities in the United States. He went to Duke. He was actually discovered on a CIS tour and chatted with Anne, the recruiter, and Phyllis, the recruiter at Duke, and ended up going to Duke. And so, you know, he himself is full of these international education stories and backgrounds that we all live and thrive and work in. And unfortunately, when he was signing up to take the TOEFL, he had to travel to El Salvador because there were no more seats or test dates available for the next few months before the deadline. And it was a lot more dangerous than it is today. And it's just, you know, you all know these obstacles that exist before the students that universities unintentionally put in the way of students. And this is one of these. And so as we started to develop more language aptitude and technology, and we're starting to assess users' abilities and developing new tools, we thought about developing the English proficiency tool in a way to really break that access and really change how we're doing admissions and how we're testing people, and using adaptive technology to make an adaptive test that can lower barriers and increase opportunities for English language learners everywhere. So we're of course talking today about students, but there are other uses for that test for proving English ability. And so that is our mission, that's our founding, and a little bit more, I think this is what drew me to Duolingo. This was a big part, if not the entire thing, was that there was this really interesting tool that was going to change how we were doing the admissions world, but most importantly, it was going to increase access. And from my experience at Vanderbilt, I was very fortunate to get to travel and recruit and work with students and counselors on the ground in 60 countries. And I loved seeing the diversity of the world and learning about so many different cultures and food and people and languages. And the one thing that I found that was in common across all the countries I went to is that there were barriers, and that it was just really tough for students to, in many cases, succeed, or even in some cases, even just to apply to college was a really big ask. So let's talk a little bit more about the test, and specifically what we do, and kind of how it works. So again, it is an online adaptive test. And so it's a convenient test. You can take it anywhere in the world. You just need a laptop with a forward-facing camera or a desktop with a camera attachment. It is fast, and so it's not only a shorter test, around an hour in length, but the students will receive their test results in about 48 hours, and then they can share it with anyone for free. And that is most important. I love that. It is free shares. It's not after 5, let's start charging you and make more money. It's once you've got a test that's certified, it's valid for 2 years' time, and it's free to share with unlimited schools. And most importantly, again, it's affordable. We didn't even talk about the price yet, but that's a huge part as well about who we are and our value proposition, is that it is an affordable test. It's only $49. And again, no cost to send your shares. Let's look a little bit of a comparison of how we look at just 2 of the other tests, the TOEFL and the IELTS. Of course, from the cost perspective, a whole lot more affordable. Locations, again, you take it anywhere that you have good Wi-Fi service. The test length is a little shorter, and that's because it is that adaptive test. And so it can be more efficient. And so instead of being in a traditional test environment where we need to test and have maybe about a third of the time will be spent on beginner, entry level information, about a third of the time is kind of more all around the middle, and then about a third of it's going to be more of your advanced English skills. That's why those tests can be so long. With our test, we can kind of cut through that and quickly ascertain which level are you in, and then dive into that level and really understand exactly what your English ability is. And so it can be more efficient for the test taker, for us, the test provider, across the board. The turnaround time, again, is 2 days. So a student takes the test sometime tonight, and they'll have the results on Wednesday afternoon or evening, maybe even before that in some cases. And so at that point, they can go online, they can then watch the interview, read their writing samples that were part of their test. And then if they think everything looks good, their score is going to be sufficient for all the universities they're applying to, then they can go online, start typing in and adding the schools they want to share it with. And it goes all through our portal. And that's important too. And again, from the making sure it's free to share, we want to make sure that students don't have to circumvent our system to avoid spending money like they might with other tests, where they can send a PDF or a screen share, or a counselor could verify a score. In our cases, because it's free to share, we want to make sure students always go online and share through the portal, because that's also the only way that the universities will accept it, to make sure that it's a valid test score. Accepted by thousands of universities around the world. We are, of course, a US company. And so we've started with a lot of the US universities, which I know is what you are all working with. But it's important for you all to know in your scope, is that we're starting to work and rise and grow in Canada, UK, Europe, other countries, Central America, South America, Asia, et cetera. So we are starting to see real growth. And so it's starting to become more of a bigger test around the world outside of the US, which is really important. And I say this too, from that perspective of Education USA advisors and working with students applying to America, is that there are some students, of course, who might look at McGill or Edinburgh or Oxford, or looking to go to the Netherlands, or maybe just some other place in addition to 5 or 6 or 7 schools in the United States. And so I think it's great to know that when you're working with these students, if they're only looking at the US, then they are probably going to be okay to just take the Duolingo English test. Obviously, there's some schools that don't accept us quite yet, but for the most part, vast majority are. But for those students, when they are looking at US schools and others, it's nice to know that pretty soon they should just be able to take the Duolingo English test for pretty much most of those schools. And that's what we are doing. That's what my job is. And my colleagues like Sam Fleischman, who you know is working with universities in the US and around the world to hopefully get them to adopt the test as an option. So here's just a small sampling of some big schools, big volume, lots of applications. And again, we run the gamut from Houston Community College to NYU to a Duke or Columbia. Here's another big smattering. You can go online and see the full list at englishtest.duolingo.com/institutions. And you can also then search. So if you just are curious about specific schools as you're working and advising with students, you can go online to this website and just search in and build a list for anyone who's interested. The test scale, so you're probably curious about the numbers. You've maybe seen or had some students who've taken it. The scoring is on a scale from 10 to 160. For those of you, I'm sure many are familiar with the CEFR, the Common European Framework of Reference for Language Acquisition and Skills, and understanding kind of across languages, what are the common skills. And so on the entry level, A1, A2, all the way up to the highest C1, C2. So your more selective universities are kind of in that 120 and up range. You can see here, your more selective, 120, 125. Sometimes some universities might even say, closer to 130, the better. Every university is going to be a little different, but for the most part, you're seeing them in there. 100 to 110 is a pretty good range as well. And then you will see some schools a little bit lower, just depending on what they're looking for, or perhaps pathway programs, community colleges, just depending. Understanding the scores too, let's just compare it across from the other tests. If you're looking at around 100, that would kind of be a good barometer on the TOEFL. For some things, that's around a 7, 7.5 on the IELTS, or in that high level on the CEFR. And again, around the 120 mark for our test. You can go online and discover and kind of mess around with the scales to understand the scores a little better if you like. As far as the overview, the test itself, again, is just under an hour. You take it whenever you want. Right in early in the morning, first thing when you wake up as a student, to the end of the night. Everyone's a little different, and we find that students are taking it at different times of the day, depending on really their own preference. And that's a really nice change of pace too, is that it's up to the student when they want to take it. Not only the time of day, but if they want to push it a couple more weeks, if they want to prepare a little bit more, whatever that might be. And so the students have more control. And again, this is just one more big aspect of that Duolingo difference, is that the students have more control. We're trying to remove a little bit of the test anxiety throughout this as well. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Certification, again, over the next 48 hours, the tests will be reviewed by proctors. This is asynchronous proctoring. So behind the scenes, after the test is finished, proctors on different levels will review the test and certify that there have been no rules broken, that the results are ready to go, and then they will certify, and the students will get an alert that they can check out their results. Again, the score results are valid for 2 years' time. And again, sharing happens on demand, no extra cost. Once they get it, they can start sending them out. They could wait another year to send them out, whatever they want to do. The test security is paramount to what we do as well. You're probably very curious, how can we make sure that the test is just as secure, if not more secure, than the other legacy test providers? And part of our security comes with the fact that it's an adaptive test. And so we have a very low item frequency rate, meaning that there's so many test questions and items in this huge pool that we can pull from that students aren't going to see them repeated. And so you can see that at the bottom. Someone would have to take the test over 1,000 times to see a question repeated, which is going to take them over 40 years to do. And so it's just not conceivable. So that's part of our security, is that there's a lot of questions. And again, the adaptive nature is going to say that if we all start taking the test right now, we're not going to see the same types of questions. We're going to have different, unique experiences. Again, the remote proctoring is a huge part of what we do. And I'll talk about this a little bit. The first and foremost, the artificial intelligence while the test is happening is a big part of our security. Of course, we're monitoring and looking at around 75 different behaviors. And this is a good example of where you can leverage technology, but you still want that human touch. You still want to have eyes on it to be able to understand from the human context what's happening in the room. Is there more light coming in? If it's something simple that happened, or maybe it's a tech issue, something innocuous with the rule being broken, then we're going to email the student and give them instructions, clear instructions on what they need to do when they take the test again, to make sure that they can get a certified result. Make sure that you have no one in your room, and make sure that you have, hooked up to Ethernet to have better Wi-Fi if it was a tech issue or whatever it might be. And we'll give that student a code so that they can go ahead and take the test again. They don't need to pay $49 more to try again if something small wasn't working on our end. So students really need to know when you're working with them. If something didn't go right with their test, they didn't get the results, they need to check their email. So I know you're probably tired of telling students 100 times, work with an email for all your admissions, tests, for your accounts, for the schools that you're getting information from, and make sure that you keep it all simple and in one place, and make sure you're checking that constantly. This is important for us. If the test isn't valid, we're going to give them a reason. We're going to give them more information. And if they can test again, then that'll be a little code. They can go forward with that. In the event, it's rare, but in the event that we do catch a student cheating, breaking the rules maliciously, then at that point, the student will no longer be able to take another Duolingo English test. Melissa, I do see a couple chat questions coming in. Should we answer a couple of those?
So those are just to get a little conversation, just asking folks who have practiced the Duolingo app, what languages they have started learning.
Oh, great.
So it's more, we have one so far who's been using it to learn German. I've been using it for French and Arabic. So
oh, nice.
A little conversational aspect there for now.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And if you do have questions, please do let us know. Last point about the test security is that, of course, it's all using artificial intelligence from end to end. So how we develop the questions, the item types, to how it's being scored and created all the way through the end of the data points that we're being able to collect throughout with this artificial intelligence aspect is going to be crucial to how we continue to develop the test to make sure that we are identifying and able to stop rule breaking or suspicious behavior and are able to catch those types of things. And so there's so much going on from the tech side that it's just so different. You also just think about a traditional test center with, maybe 20, 30 students in a room and one person trying to keep an eye out versus us, the artificial intelligence, then the 2 human proctors. So like a 1-to-3 ratio compared to the maybe 20-to-1. As far as the test security, we will need a valid ID. And so that's a combination where we're using AI as well as trained proctors to make sure that we can verify the identity. The browser lockdown is a big part of the security as well. Again, so that there is no other website that you can be on. You can't be using your laptop for anything else. You can't have any apps or plugins like Grammarly or other ways that you can maybe have tools coming up as well.
And one question with that, John, is it possible for students to take the test on their cell phones? We do have students in the Africa region who only have access to phones for something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, no. We tried that early on, and it was both from the user experience of trying to have a lot of long form writing on a phone is very difficult, and especially to try to edit it and to do all this in like a minute and a half, if that's how long that question might be, to even the longer form writing at the end of the test. So it just wasn't a good experience. And also to enable the best security as well, it's best for a computer. And so, yes, we understand that. It's something that we work a lot with a lot of organizations, whether it's obviously Education USA or the Holly Access Network. And in many cases, some counselors, some teachers, some organizations are scheduling and letting students take tests in their centers, their advising centers, or in their counseling office or classroom or whatever it might be, of finding a place where they can be the only student in a room and take a test for an hour. So we understand it's difficult, and it just at this point, no, it has to be on a laptop or a computer.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And then last but not least, there is the video sample, which admissions institutions then get to review and see kind of, and really more importantly, hear in their own ears, like in your own voice, what does the student have to say? They're going to get some questions that are really thought provoking and hopefully can give a good answer. And institutions in some cases are watching these. Some are large and have so many applications that they're going to be looking at the score and really only have time to know if the score is a yes or a no for them if it's above what their minimum is. But for many universities, smaller applicant pools, maybe more liberal arts schools, I know, for instance, at Vanderbilt, they like to watch and I love to being able to hear what the student's saying. And also, as I'm writing my comments about the file, just to have that playing in the background. And in so many cases, being able to learn a little bit more about the student's point of view, how they see the world, and that can add some really good information and comments as we, as admissions officers, are fighting and trying to advocate for these students to get in. So make sure when you're talking with the students, and they'll know that there is a video sample and the writing sample, that they need to take this just as seriously as if this was, a short answer they were submitting to a university of their dreams. It's not, oh, I got to the end of the test, let me just write a little bit. The test is still going on, and while it's not part of what's scored, it's what the institutions will see. And so it's really important. And it can really be a big difference maker. We've heard from so many universities that have point blank said, yeah, the video sample gave me enough to really push this student in at really competitive, selective places. And so this can be a great chance for them to share a little bit more about who they are and their voice. As far as just kind of since the pandemic, how we are responding, unlimited test seats, again, it's all online. And so we can handle, any number of students taking the test at a time. And so it's not going to get over flooded. We have around the clock support 24/7. So when students have issues, they cannot figure something out, something's just not working, there is a orange help button in the bottom right corner of our website at all times, and that can be really helpful. There's also a student email support channel that they'll get information from, again, if they have any issues with the test, and also certifying the test with them. And then last but not least, we've had 100% uptime. So being able to leverage our incredible technology expertise internally in-house, what we have as a tech company to begin with before we started developing this test, is really a great asset to have these wonderful engineers and making sure that our test is always running, because that's most important, right? All right, any questions before we move on to subscores? I'll also just take a quick sip of water.
Yes, no problem. So there is a question related to the scoring. So since the test adapts based on the student's answers, the comment is, will that affect the score that is received? So if a student's English language skills are good, will they have easy to moderate questions? And then also, does that mean they will not get a high score if they get harder questions?
Yeah, so it's literally the first couple questions are kind of understanding more of a baseline of how the student's level is, and so they'll get all sorts of types of questions. So some will be easier, some will be very hard, and that gives a very quick understanding and quick snapshot of where someone might be. And now the AI can start to test that. Okay, we think you're around 120. We think you're pretty high. Let's give you some tougher questions. And it turns out, no, you just maybe luckily got some of those questions right. You didn't actually know why they were right. You just maybe got them right. Or maybe you just kind of made an educated guess. And so, okay, we didn't get a lot of those questions right. So now the next question might be further down the scale. And, oh, you didn't get that right either. So we need to come further down. Okay, now we're maybe in the more of the 100, maybe the 90 range. And now we start to lock in that this is maybe where the student's skill level is. And vice versa. It's the student messes up. They accidentally miss something. They hit the wrong button. You can't go back on our test. And we explain that with students throughout the test readiness guide and on the website and the instructions, so they make sure that they really understand what the rules are and how to work it. But once they hit next, that's it. And so if they need to understand too, students understand that, look, if you've messed up one thing early on, that's not going to wreck your whole score, because the AI can then quickly understand, oh my gosh, we were way wrong thinking this student was maybe in the 60, 70, 80 range. They've gotten all these questions immediately right within, seconds of time work. Let's pump it back up to a higher level. They got that right. Okay, let's keep going. So on a graph of what a student's test score might go like, it might be up here and then down and then figuring out somewhere in the middle. And it might be all the way at the top and then we never barely leave because that student is really incredible. It's going to kind of range and ebb and flow based off of every student, and every student is unique as well. And based off the combination of the questions they get and how they handle each one. Also, each question is dynamic. So it's not just going to be one multiple choice question. It's going to be maybe identifying which words are vocabulary. And so there might be 9 possible answers, or giving a long form answer, or describing a picture in a dictation. So it's never just going to be yes or no. It's going to be many skill sets and areas that we can evaluate in each question. So it's really a unique test in that area. That's a great question. That's a great question. Keep these questions coming. Thank you.
Question about rescheduling. If the exam date that was initially scheduled, do they have to reschedule? And do they have to pay fees if they want to reschedule the exam?
Oh, that's a great question. So there is no scheduling of our exam. They sign up to take a test, they pay for it, or maybe they've received a credit to take a free test from a university or an organization, and they take the test or redeem the credit, so to speak, whenever they want to. So there is no signing up, I'm going to take it next Saturday. If they feel like they want to take it next Saturday and wake up and don't feel good or are sick, or feel like they want to wait another week or whatever it is, or just wait a couple hours and take it that night. Again, we talk about full student control. They literally decide the moment they want to take the test.
Great, thank you. And I think we will be addressing the preparation. I know the next question is how can students prepare? So I'll table that for now because I do believe you have some of that information there too.
I do indeed. That's perfect, Melissa. Thank you. And I'll just quickly introduce the subscores just so you all know that we've added these. If you were more familiar with our test in more of our nascent stages, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we did not have subscores. We added them last summer, July of 2020. For many reasons, being able to go a little deeper into the weeds to understand the nuances of a student's skill is really important from the admissions perspective, of course. From the counseling perspective, it's really helpful, I think, for the student to understand maybe what areas they're strong in or weak in, or identify areas they can work on if their scores maybe aren't as sufficient. But we wanted to be able to add subscores for a myriad of reasons to help university students across the board. And so when we were adding them, it was practical to think about kind of the traditional speaking, writing, reading, and listening skill sets, but we were challenged by our psychometricians and our technical advisory board and other linguists that we should think about how these skill sets are really integrated and how it's actually more of how these skills combine to actually produce, for instance, language and practice. And so when we produce conversation, it's using the speaking and the listening. When you are in a class lecture, it is requiring listening and the reading. And so we've kind of combined some of these into what's known as integrated modalities. And so our subscores use these traditional reading, writing, speaking, listening, but kind of look a little bit further up, maybe 20,000 foot view of how they're combined. And so you'll see things, comprehension is often the highest number that you'll get, the highest score. If that makes sense, when you're learning a language, it's brand new, you can often comprehend more, right? You go to a country and you're starting to pick up the language, you can kind of understand what they're saying, but you're not going to be able to completely write down or speak back to them in a paragraph what exactly it is you want or think or need, right? And on the other end, the production, that lags, that takes more time. Production is kind of being able to put it all together, thinking about a big classroom presentation after a research project, and you have to put together the slide deck and you've researched it, and now you have to present it to the class and take Q&A, and it's all these things together. And so that's going to take more time. And so, and that's why at the higher level, when schools really do need to see really strong scores, it's because they need to be able to have students come in the door and be able to do those types of presentations versus maybe a pathway program where they can start to learn really the English and now be comfortable to go into a university setting to be able to produce something like that. So that's how the subscores are. That's, nothing too big right now because they're still brand new as far as what you'll need to know about for minimums and expectations of universities. Most universities are going to be evaluating it over the course of this admissions cycle to see if they want to set minimums or their internal suggestions. And so some universities have started to set a few minimums. But for the most part, people are studying this year. I think you'll see a lot of that shift next year and hear more about universities requiring a certain number. All right, any questions about the subscores before? Okay, it looks like we're still questioning on the chat about allowed to take it. Okay, so I'll keep going then. So this is what you all were just asking about just a moment ago. Really fun to talk about the preparing for the test. And again, as I introduced it earlier, this is a paradigm shift, just like everything we're doing at the test. We want to be access forward in everything that we do. And one of the main things that we've observed as admissions officers, and a lot of our team, I should say, is former admissions officers or working in counselors, like Sam Fleischman, as you all I think know, was a counselor at Hong Kong International School and Singapore International Community School before that. And so he has 15 years or so of experience and in the field, and as do a lot of us in admissions. And as you all know, you can pay a lot of money to be able to get a pretty good score on other tests. If you have a lot of money, it's often a pay for play experience. And so we want to make sure that every access point is free for us. And that if you want to come in or every entry point for the test, if you want to come in and learn how to take the test, if you want to get the highest score possible on our test, you can do that whether you have a lot of money or you have no money. And so we have this great new guide, as I mentioned, as well as we have completely free practice tests. And we've always had free practice tests. So with any students, if you want to just go online and take a quick practice test and you don't have time for the full hour test, that's a great way to do it and use these resources. And talk a little bit more about the test prep. Traditional test prep, of course, as I was just mentioning, is often geared towards memorizing questions, understanding the test strategies, kind of a stressful test experience, and of course, lots and lots of hours and long practice tests, spending, in upwards of sometimes days and weeks as far as total time spent on all these practice tests. It's very expensive and lengthy to retest. So I know we had a question about retesting here for students. Students can take a test twice every 30 days. So you can take a Duolingo English test 2 times every 30 days. And then after that, if you needed to take it again, you'd have to wait until the end of that time period. And so it's very quick and easy in the event that someone was taking a test late, which sometimes students do, pushing the deadline, didn't get the score they needed, and need to take it again quickly to resubmit. A little different for us. Okay, a little bit about how our readiness works. Again, I mentioned the free practice test, this test guide that I've been talking about, which I'll show you a few snippets of and recommend you all to go online and download. It's very helpful. Please download. You can disseminate to students. If you are working with any students who are going to take the test immediately, please recommend they check these resources out, because these are really, really great. And they're also hot off the presses. It's still maybe just a month old, so it's still relatively new as far as the test readiness site. And again, it's just some other things. Each test is unique. It's a convenient, low-stress test experience, as well as an affordable on-demand retest, as I mentioned. All right. In many ways to prepare for the test, it's using your English skills. And so for the students who are in an English school or English academy of any kind, fantastic. Hopefully they have a lot of time and resources where they can be in that. For students who are not, finding ways, and I know it's very difficult in COVID, so finding more virtual ways to join some sort of online organizations, or have an English chat club with other students who are applying to school in the US, or maybe other students at Education USA, or maybe whatever it might be. But we're just encouraging students to just find ways to read, to write, to speak, to be in that environment. Download the free test readiness guide. It's about 78 pages, so it's a little lengthy. It will take a little time to go through it, but it's a very thorough guide that will really help students get ready. The free practice test, of course. Preparing your test environment, a reminder for the rules: you can't have a cell phone or any other smart devices. It's just the test laptop or the computer that you're taking the test on. So whichever one it is, this one piece, this laptop, and that's it. No paper, no documents to write, nothing. It's just me and the computer, and it's pretty quick. You don't need anything else, but you want to make sure it's well lit. You want to make sure you're the only person in the room. You have good Wi-Fi signals. So just doing some of that prep time in advance to make sure that you really are ready to take the test. And then whenever you're rested and ready, you pull the trigger and can start taking the test. Free practice test looks like this. Again, I'd encourage you as counselors especially to go take that. A little bit more about the test environment: well-lit room. Again, you need an hour's worth of time. You need to have your license or government ID passport with you, ready to go. The computer, of course, you need a supported browser. There's a couple different browsers we work with just from the tech side to make sure that we can have a full lockdown and make sure it's a secure environment. The forward-facing camera, microphone has to work, of course, and the speakers that work as well. Understanding the test rules. So some of the test rules that students need to understand, in addition to other things I mentioned today: no headphones or earphones. You cannot look off the screen. That's really important. So students need to understand you have to look at the screen the whole time to follow the test rules and to make sure your test is certified. Looking off could mean I'm reading something or looking or hearing or trying to do something that maybe is circumventing the rules. Again, no plugins or outside programs or apps on your computer. No one else is in the room, and no outside devices. In addition, there'll be the video interview and writing sample at the end of the test, which I mentioned. And this is great as far as, again, another chance if we have to remove student anxiety and test anxiety. Is both for the video and the writing sample, we give the student 2 prompts. They have 30 seconds to determine which prompt they think is best for them, collect their thoughts, and then they can hit record and start going for their up to 2 minutes time for their video question. Which will look like this. So you'll see 2 topics, take your time, 30 seconds. Okay, I think topic 2 is the best option. And now I can go in and record my answer. Same thing for the writing. You'll get 2 prompts, and then you'll go ahead and have a chance for video interview up to 3 minutes, for the writing sample up to 5 minutes. Again, as students can review the responses before they share their results. So if they just wanted to make sure everything sounded okay, looked okay, all that, they can take a look. And then another good resource we have is a test overview video. If you just want a very quick 3-minute snapshot or snippet, or maybe you're running a program with some students later this week, later this month, or reaching out with first year, second year, third year, fourth year, early in the process, students who need to understand about options, and you just want to let a bunch of 9th grade or 10th grade students know, hey, what is this test? This is just a quick 3-minute view to let everybody know how does it work and explain it if students aren't as familiar. And then the test readiness site. So here's just a little look of what this is. We really recommend you all go online. You can start the practice test. You can download the access guide. It was really, I think, an important part of just, trying to make sure that we were providing, again, providing a free resource. And that's something that could be really beneficial to students and counselors, but specifically for these students to really help them to get ready. And so interactive features in some of the sessions or sections that we have would be like how to test your best. So information on that, information on pacing yourself. Pace is important, especially when it might be a slightly different type of exam. And a lot of our questions, all of our questions have a timer on the top left corner of the screen, but can range from a minute or longer. And so it's just important to understand pacing yourself. And again, unlike other tests, you can't go back to other questions. Or maybe more resources on understanding the actual test questions themselves, as well as test taking strategies, writing tips, you name it. We'll pause here for questions, Melissa. I think we maybe have 1 or 2 coming in the chat.
Yes, we do. So let's see. Can you summarize, and Srinivas, I want to just make sure I'm asking the question correctly. Did you mean the main use of Duolingo? So that's one part, but how is it different from TOEFL or IELTS? And then can you learn 2 languages at the same time, or does it assist a person to learn any language, putting English as the common medium? So I think that's related more to the app, but in terms of the English test, just maybe touching quickly on how it's different from TOEFL or IELTS. Again, just summarizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. It's just some of the differences, and that's a great question. So thanks for chiming in here. Are going to be the price, right? We're going to be much more affordable, $49 compared to $200 to $300. We're also going to be cheaper as the total cost, as we are free to share test results. So it is unlimited and free test shares. We're going to be a much faster test. It's only going to be around an hour's worth of time because of that adaptive nature. We're also an adaptive test. They are a static test, paper-based versus using technology. I think how the proctoring works as well itself, is a little bit different, right? You're going to be in a room with proctors, one proctor watching a lot of students in many cases, of course, in a test center for these tests versus having people watching, 2 proctors watching the test after the test for our test, as well as AI running live during it. At the end of the day, what they measure, very, very, very similar. I mean, we're talking, all the statistics studies that you can do in the analysis of how the TOEFL and IELTS compare to each other with predicting English ability versus how we compare. And they're really all pretty much the same, same within, 0.1 or 2 points on a Pearson's R type of study. So they're very, very similar as far as the end result of what they measure, what they give you, but just kind of slightly different ways of how they're measuring it during the test itself. As far as your question about the language app, yeah, you can learn languages. If you could do multiple languages at the same time, if you want, there are some people who do that and are maybe balancing many languages. So you can definitely do that. And I'm glad you're using the Duolingo language app. So good luck with the languages that you'll be studying. Okay.
About software, I know you touched on there's preferred browsers. So someone's asking if a specific software would be needed for the exam. With the TOEFL IBT Home Edition, as an example, they need to download ProctorU.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't work with ProctorU or any of those other types of outside organizations that are doing anything from like the proctoring or running of the test. But from the specific browser, you can download a Electron is our app. You can take the test on. And so that is how we run our test. So yeah, there is a little app that you'll download and then get everything set up, and then the test will run through that. Good question. I see another one about private tutor. No, we don't offer any private tutors on Duolingo. Great question though. The scores are valid for 2 years like other tests. Yes. Great question. So the scores are valid for 2 years time. All right, we'll move on with last but not least, just the test taker steps so that that you understand kind of what the students need to do to register for a test and all that. It's a little, again, very different. You asked a question about what are the differences between the TOEFL and IELTS and Duolingo, and they're vast, they're numerous. And even from the signing up and the registration standpoint, so different, right? There's no, worry about having a test date or registering your seat. You register for the test just by signing up to take one whenever you want. Register your account. You take the practice test, as we mentioned. Go ahead and purchase the tests, $49 American, taking all the major credit cards. You then take the tests, which should take around an hour, a little bit less, 45 minutes to an hour. Again, if you're at the highest level of English ability or the lowest level, it's not going to take quite as long as the AI can normally ascertain your ability. If you're more in the middle, of course, it might take 3, 4, 5 minutes longer. So every test taker's experience is unique in that. And then you'll get the certificate, which will look like this, having the name and the date of the test. There's some more information you can see online, but then most importantly, giving you a snapshot of what the score is out of 160 and what that really means as far as a quick description of their skill set. And then looking at our subscores. So again, literacy, conversation, comprehension, and production, and their score range on that, as well as their score. Important to note again with these, I mentioned earlier, right? Comprehension often is stronger. That's often it's one of the first kind of skills that you're developing, whereas the production lags. And so this score is very good. 120 is going to get you into just about any place in the world. However, a production score might look a little lower. Nothing weird or alarming here. It's just how the numbers all shake out. And so that's right on cue for someone with a 120 ability. And then once they get their certificate and their results have been certified, they'll get that email alert, they'll go back online, and then they'll select sending it off to, in this case, a university, and starting to add the universities they want to submit into, confirming that that's the right list, and then hitting send. The university then, so you understand, the university receives it immediately, but only to their Duolingo dashboard, their English test dashboard. And so in the event that a university was in a pinch and like in committee and needed to see a score, those types of dire last minute that we're going tomorrow, we need this information or we can't move on with this student, do know that they can see the results immediately on the dashboard. We can help provide those immediately, making sure that they know how to log in and see that. It will hit their reader, their Slate, their CRM, how they actually read their files. In many cases, Slate is being used, as you're probably familiar with. And it will hit those systems at the universities after midnight and then upload into the student's file the next day. And that's midnight US time zone. So all this might really not matter too much based off of where you are, but just to know that there is an immediate way for a university to view it if they needed to in a pinch, see it immediately. But for the most part, it's going to be in the next couple hours and happen overnight in the US. And then I just wanted to wrap up with a couple frequently asked questions. And as far as, just common things that I think it's really important for students to understand, like, should I skip a question if I'm unsure? No, you need to answer every question to the best of your ability. There is no going back, no reviewing your work. It's answering it and then moving on. How should I pace the test? Again, we have a lot of information in our test readiness guide, which can help. But all the questions are integrated into one section of the test. So there's a lot of, again, timers up in the corner, really helpful information about just knowing how to pace on our readiness guide as well. But just understanding that you need to be moving along with the pace of the test because there is no going back. If you don't click next, the test just moves on. So be ready to move. Yeah, going back and reviewing your answers, like I mentioned before, unfortunately, no, you cannot. A couple more questions here. Can you take notes? No, unfortunately, you can't have pen or paper or iPhone or anything like that around. If you get it wrong in the beginning, this is a question that someone was asking earlier. No, again, the adaptive test engine is going to adjust. And so it's going to always be bouncing around, trying to challenge you to make sure it really understands what is the level of what you can get right, what you can understand, and understanding exactly your ability. No, not worrying about the accent. Will I receive a lower score if I have an accent? No, the grading does not take that into account. So just speak normally and clearly, just be yourself. Don't rush, of course, don't speak too quickly, but just be normal. The accent will not have an impact. The student visa, that's a great question. Will I still be processed for a student visa? That's a big thing, right? And as you all know, in the US, the I-20 is distributed through the university once they've been accepted. And so it's not about your TOEFL or your Duolingo English Test or your Pearson English Test or whatever it might be to get the visa in the United States. And so it's going to all be processed and distributed through the university. And so, you know, by all means, take your certificate if you want with all your other paperwork of everything else, but it's not going to be a part of the student visa. So you're still going to be fine coming to the United States, taking the Duolingo English Test, of course. How often can I take it? We already mentioned this, 2 days every 30 or 2 tests every 30 days. How long are my English test results valid for? Again, reminder, they're valid up 2 years. And we accept all major credit cards, Alipay in China, in case anyone here popped in from China or works with students or has counselor friends or connections in China, know that. All right. And last but not least, what if I experience technical difficulty? Again, if there's some sort of technical difficulty, if there's some sort of issue that happens, you lose Wi-Fi, power outages, whatever it might be, things happen all the time. Just your Wi-Fi blinked out right in the middle of a meeting. Mine did yesterday, right? So if I was taking the test in that moment, it would have crashed too because my Wi-Fi was out. So students will get an email with technical instructions. And again, that code to go ahead and take the test. We're not going to charge the student again to take the test. They take it again for free. So just tell those students if something didn't go right, check their email. Reminder, we have incredible support. There's great FAQ documents online, many, many questions that they can go online and get answers to, as well as the full test readiness guide, as well as full 24/7 support by just hitting the orange help button at the bottom right. Facebook group for learners. I am sure there are tons of Facebook group for learners, but there is an official Facebook group for counselors or advisors. And so I think that is a great resource for all of you and really recommend that you join that. And so you can just request to be added to that group on the Duolingo English Test counselor group on Facebook. Sam Fleischman runs that. So feel free to, or Melissa, feel free. You can just send me everyone's email after the meeting and we can add you guys in. But that's a great Facebook group to get connected to, but and there's helpful information on that group as well. Okay, that's all I have. I think the timing worked out pretty well.
Yes,
yeah, that wasn't bad.
perfect.
40 minutes. So we answered lots of questions. What else do we have?
Yes, we do have some questions. So, and one of them is specific to Morocco in terms of local restrictions with card payments, but this is something that I think impacts other countries. You've mentioned major credit cards are accepted, but in cases where, I mean, are local cards accepted? Are there other arrangements that you have seen worked out in some cases?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question and where our support team can help. And so they're constantly working with students in issues like this. So what I would love is if you can send me an email. Let me just pop my email again here in the chat. Yeah. And then I will work with our support team and get you in touch with our support team. And we can figure out a solution for that. Yeah, we've had other issues in other countries and can find ways to get around. So yeah, please do email me and let's have more information about Morocco. Love to find out exactly what's not working and we'll go from there. Thank you for asking.
And then just in terms of the number of institutions, so I know an unlimited number can receive the score results for students. Is that something they can do at one time? Do they have to know the specific email or do they search for the institution? How do they get that sent out?
So as far as how does the student send their scores out?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so they go online once those results have been certified. They'll go on, and again, that one I can actually just back up real fast. The screen will look like this. Oh no, this is being recorded, so it's going to look really messy.
It's okay.
Oh well, I'm committed now. I'm here, and they'll go on to share results. And in this case, they'll click university, not secondary school, but there are secondary schools that use our test as well for admissions purposes. I'll click university, and then they can just start typing in the universities. They don't need to know a code or anything else to send it. So it's just, I want to apply to Columbia. Great. I also want to apply to Vanderbilt, and I want to apply to Indiana. Okay, there we go. Those are my 3 schools, and that's all the 3 check. Yep. It's, it's almost like a shopping item list. That's what you want to send it to, confirm it, and then it's electronically sent.
Excellent. And back to payment, is PayPal a valid payment option, or is that?
No, not at this time. PayPal is not valid. That's a great question, but I think something that I'll take back to our support team to see if that could be an option for some of these folks in Morocco or other places.
Great. So those are the questions that have been listed in the chat so far, but just making sure I didn't skip anybody. Please feel free to raise your virtual hand if you'd like to unmute yourself and either add a comment or question, or share any insights that you have maybe with students that you're working with, or for those of you who are students, any feedback that you might have that's also helpful and interesting to hear. So feel free to do that or continue to type in the chat box.
Absolutely, either or. And I just for you all to know as well, I think I mentioned it just kind of briefly, made a comment, but just to reiterate, last year we had, I think it was over 2,000 more universities come on board. It was an astronomical number. And so, when I know we've had conversations with many advisors over the last few years, and just even the 2 years time that I've been working with Duolingo, but that's a really good sign, and that's a really big change. And so, if a year ago we've been having this talk, we might have been talking a little bit about some schools still aren't quite accepting it. And at this point, it's really just a couple that aren't accepting it. And so in many cases, I think now an obstacle that held us back maybe 2 years ago when I joined was, oh, I'm working with a student, but only 4 of the schools they want to apply to accepts you and the other 5 don't. So what do I do? Whereas that's, we knew that needed to be, we needed to end that move. And finally, enough schools have come on board where in many cases, I think students shouldn't have a problem at all applying to schools, especially if they're looking at all for funding or anything like that. Many of those schools that offer funding are already have been accepting our tests just because of that big access tie and access mission. So
great. I don't see any additional questions. So if there aren't any final questions, I do want to just add my, oh yes, so just reiterating something to bring back to John, just
I know, Claire, and good to see you. I didn't know you were on the call. It's good to have you here. It really is. I know, and this is a great example of the things that we battle. Even in the test design, could the test be 30 minutes longer? Could we add something else? Could we do something? Probably not, because at the end of the day, part of what's pushing us is that students around the world, with even getting the chance to get in a laptop, might not have good Wi-Fi or have just not good technology. And so it needs to be as short and compressed as possible. But yeah, I know. Thanks for bringing it back to our attention, and we'll continue to figure out ways we can circumvent that.
Yes. But I just want to say thank you, John. This was great, very informative. I know I've known parts of Duolingo and had different conversations with different members of your team, but this was really great to get the full picture, much more detail. And again, to all the advisors and students and REACTs who are on the call as well, thank you for joining and asking your questions. But again, remember, John shared that there is a short, quick overview that definitely for your students, you will be able to kind of give them that little introduction as, they maybe consider their different language proficiency test options. So thank you again to everyone, and have a good evening, morning, afternoon for the rest of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your time.
Okay, bye-bye.